Hello and welcome, and you're watching NewsX. I'm Megha Sharma. Joining me on the show today is Walter J. Lindner. He is the former Indian ambassador to India, and he has now released his new book, What the West Should Learn from India. Ambassador Lindner has long-standing ties with India, right from the time when he was 20 years of age and backpacked his way to India, to then returning to India as the German ambassador to the country in 2019. So let's introduce Ambassador Walter Lindner. Thank you very much for joining us. And of course, I want to be, acquainted, and my audience would also like to know, Ambassador, about the book, what the West should learn from India, and what inspired you to write this book.
Yes, first of all, Megha, let me say thank you for being on your program again. I do remember very well when we spent quite some time in your studio in the NewsX. I do remember it was 3 years or 4 years ago. So I'm happy to be back on the show. Well, as I said, I spent 3.5 years as ambassador in your country until 2022, and when I left the country, many Indians, be it in India or in Germany, asked me to write about my experiences because I was. Those who know me knew that I was not a normal, the ordinary ambassador who sits in Chanakya Puri and sits in the residence and goes to fancy cocktail parties. I wanted to travel. I wanted to see every inch of India, and I wanted to get to know what's the DNA of India. And so, with all these experiences of traveling, of spiritual and political issues, they wanted me to write something. And then the book came out in Germany, and we thought maybe it might be a good idea to also publish it in English. And with Sugarnaut, we had a very good editing house. And so it's just coming out right now. And I think it's an interesting read also for non-Germans and for Indians to see how a well-wishing, a well-thinking foreigner thinks about India.
Oh, absolutely. This is much needed. It is interesting to know. That's also the topic, the title of the book, What the West Should Learn from India, is something very intriguing as well, and I'm very keen on reading it as well. Talking about the book, and you've spoken particularly about this third axis that is emerging, which is the global South in multipolar world. How has this impacted the West, and do you think the global South is a threat to the West today?
Well, first of all, if you look at the numbers, around 20% of the world's population lives in the Western countries. 20%. 80% live in the so-called global South. So it's just totally outnumbering the West. And it's getting more and more because the birth rates are much higher in the global South than in the West. That's the first thing. Second, I think due to history and to colonial experiences and through many developments, we in the West, we always thought or think that we are the center of the world. Whatever happens in Europe or in the Western countries has to be of importance to the rest of the world. But on the other hand, things which happen in countries of the global South, they are interesting, but maybe are not so central than the European issues. And this is wrong. This is totally wrong. And I say it very often, and said it in discussions here in Germany, that we should step down from this moral pedestal and look down to the global South countries from a kind of a moral pedestal, which is totally uncalled for, giving the past of the colonial nations in Europe, which all have been colonial nations. So this is just not fair, and it's not corresponding to the truth. It's a multipolar world where countries from the global South, be it India, be it China, be it many other countries from the BRICS countries, are now, of course, calling many shots. So I think we better take this into account and speak from eye to eye, and not with a kind of a descendant attitude.
Okay. Also, you've spoken about, as you say, India's growing might in the global sphere, where India is now the fastest growing major economy. It is soon going to surpass Germany as the third largest economy. What makes India tick?
Well, on the global scene, I think the international role of India has grown, as your foreign minister said eloquently, I guess a few days ago again, that India is well positioned as a country. It's a huge country which is not belonging to a bloc, or a military bloc. They belong to different state associations like the BRICS, which is more, let's say, on the Chinese Russian side, but also to the Quad, for example, where the Western countries are, and they are participating in the G7 meetings, in the G20 meetings, and they have good contacts to. They had good contacts to the Biden administration, and now very good contacts to the Trump administration. They had good contacts to the Palestinians and to the Israelis. So they, through this policy of non-adherence to a military association, I think they have reserved them a very good space for whatever mediation comes up in the future and whatever country is needed to build bridges. So this is, I think, something very important for India. Now, on the economic development, as you rightly say, they will soon overtake Germany. I think it's because we in the West, we have, especially in Germany, but many other countries in the West also, we are a bit too self-complacent. We think we have the technology and we have all these things. While when you look to the Indian continent, then you see that people are eager to make progress. They are eager to walk the extra mile. You know, the answer is mostly yes, and then what is the question? While in Europe we have rules and we have, we are a bit too much relying on our past, and we are not as eager as like the Indians are in the IT sector, in the artificial intelligence. That's what you have in what we can learn from India. This eagerness, this entrepreneur spirit, and these kind of things. I think we have, not that we have forgotten it or unlearned it, but we still need a repush to reactivate ourselves to see how other nations, especially India, are advancing.
Right, absolutely. Now, you've remarked that in your book, you've remarked that, the Indian democracy does not conform to Western ideals. Now, you've also claimed that India faces a challenge from the rise of Hindu nationalism. What do you make of that? Why do you say that?
Well, you see, democracy is a big word, and democratic systems are different, and they vary across the world. No democracy is perfect. Not the one in the US, as we have seen a few years ago in the White House. Not in Germany. There are also some shortcomings. Nowhere in the world, and of course also not in India. But India has the challenge of being the biggest democracy in the world. So it has to organize elections, 1 billion people. We have elections in Germany now in a few weeks' time. So we have 80 million people and maybe 60 million voters. So this is, in comparison to 1 billion, it's a less giant task. So the democracy standards are different in the world, and there are not only standards, but there are, due to the history, due to the colonial past, and to other things, there are differences there, and we should refrain from, preaching and teaching other countries which way they should run their democracy. So that's an important point to make. Now, on the religious freedoms, of course, there are things to be criticized in Germany, but also in India. And we do this, and we did this, but behind closed doors in the spirit of friendship and not with a megaphone. We do this because friends among friends, you can say all the things which you think might be problematic. And when it comes down to the religious fundamentalism and misuse of religious ideologies, yes, it happens there, but it happens in a way which the government is acknowledging, and we are convinced they're doing something against it. But if it's not enough, if the tolerance is too big, we mention it. But I think we have one reflex, which is a kind of automatic reflex in Western media and Western politicians. Whenever they look at India, the first thing is criticism. They say, okay, this is a lack of democracy. This is, I think first you have to understand the Indian mentality, where do India come from? From a totally poorish country after the British left. And then, it comes with the challenges of such a huge nation. And you have 10 different huge religions in the country, and world religions in the country. And then you have a federal system. So you have so many challenges which the Indian government, whatever it is it the BJP government or Congress government, are trying to master. And I think before we criticize this, and we know it all better, we should give the Indian side and the government also a voice and let them explain how they see things, rather than coming, knowing everything, and making a quick judgment. This is not the way I did it.
Okay. And, speaking about the same thing, I will say, contrary to the Western narrative, the Muslim population in India continues to rise. It was 9.8%. In 1951, it has risen to 14.2%, and which is also the 2011 census. So, which means there has been an increment in the Muslim population. Now, there are a number of welfare schemes, benefits that are targeted primarily to the millions of Muslims that are living in our country. There are reservations for Muslims in our country. This is in stark contrast to Hindu minorities who have faced persecution at the hands of Muslim majority nations, particularly Pakistan, Bangladesh and Afghanistan. So, why does the mainstream Western media continue to term India as a Hindu nationalist nation?
Because that's why I wrote the book, in German, for German readers also, because that they know more about India. So that is a huge majority in India are Hindus, and this is, why should they hide it? This is a mostly Hindu-dominated country, but the constitution foresees all the protections for minorities, be it the huge minority, which is the Muslims, but also Christians and Jewish and other religions. So this is all in the constitution. when in the West we see, this Hindu nationalism, they take it as a kind of totally negative thing, which it's only in the negative repercussions, yes. But in the other hand, it's a country with so many, a huge minority of Hindus, and in comparison to these numbers, I think the accidents which are happening against other religions are pretty small numbers. But, this is at least, I would expect from all the observers, be it political observers or members of parliament who come to visit, to take in the facts and to see also beyond the propaganda or beyond prejudges which they have. Some arrive with already a clear formed opinion, and then they just want to confirm their opinion, which is not true. If you look at the world, you can see there are a lot of nations where you have problems with ethnic tensions. In comparison to that, India, with all these numbers of 1.4 billion people, it's relatively a small number, and the coexistence and the living together of religions and of different mentalities is working pretty well. Of course, there are cases where it's not the case. Where you have the cow people the fanatics who protect the cows, or fanatics who want to tear down old mosques. Of course, here we have the tribunals, and here we have a legal system which protects. And as far as I know, it's working pretty well. If there are cases where it's not working well, I think we mention it, and we do mention it, but we should not lead this to an opinion of total negativity of India.
Okay. I also want to understand from you, because, during your visit and when you were the ambassador of Germany to India, you had also paid a visit to the RSS headquarters, and you had visited and met RSS chief Mohan Bhagwat, that created quite the furor. But what has been your learnings from in your understandings of the RSS?
I also write in a chapter on democracy in the book about that visit. You know, my policy as an ambassador, and it was not my first ambassadorial posting, but my seventh or eighth ambassadorial posting when I came to India. Wherever I was before, be it South Africa, Venezuela, and in African countries, I always had this different style of being an ambassador. I always went out of the residence. I always wanted to see what's happening out there. If people talk about a certain political issue, I wanted to see it. I wanted to get my own conviction, my own impression of the situation. And the same in India. When I came and I heard that more than half the cabinet members of President Modi, Prime Minister Modi's second term, more than half the members of the cabinet were RSS members or have been to RSS, and I said, okay, I wanted to see that. What's behind it? And especially as a German, you know, with our Nazi past, I've heard these rumors that you know, people said that these are Nazi people, and I wanted to go there and wanted to ask the leader of the RSS, what about these Nazi allegations and these things? And I went there, not only for visiting RSS, but also to have visited the subway which we built in Nagpur and other things. And since I was there, I said, okay, let me go there. And I talked to him, and it was a 4-eye meeting. So and we agreed not to, you know, spread what we are talking about. But I just can say I left with the impression that I could ask all the questions I had, including the one I mentioned before about the Nazi past. And the answers I got were, at least in a way, which made me think, okay, he knew that he's talking to a Western representative, and what we want to hear. Whether all his followers are, you know, following these words which he said to me, I'm not sure. There might be some fanatics which are not following this, but in my impression was I could ask all the questions, and then I could make up my mind. What do I think about this? And I think this was very useful, because it was better than just reading about it or hearing through hearsay about it. My policy is always to go there and to ask people immediately and authentically, what do they say?
Absolutely. Okay, that's an interesting.
It's all in the book.
That's an interesting perspective, and yes, absolutely, that's all there in the book. I also want to understand from you what's happening in Europe and in the West particularly, when there has been this rampant immigration that has caused a number of problems in Western economies. There have been terror attacks led by extremist groups. Is there also an inclination for people to lean towards political leaders who have strong policies against immigration and who support the policy of protectionism and levying tariffs on countries from stopping these countries and these companies from setting up base in their countries and taking away jobs of the locals? Do you think this is a trend that is building?
Yeah, I think, I mean, there's no denying that there's a trend out there to more authoritarian, to more right-wing, to more own interest protecting tendencies out there. This is undeniable. I would say, you know, after the Berlin Wall came down and the Cold War ended 20 or 25 years ago, there was a period where people thought, well, this is maybe the end of history. Now the whole world, be it Chinese, Indians, Russians, Europeans, think on the same lines, making this world a better place, you know, thinking about the challenges for mankind, you know, global warming, plastic, you know, all these kind of things which have to be solved. And then came the 9/11, the terrorist attacks by the Islamistic groups. So this was the first bashing and the first shock to us that, okay, maybe the world is not as good as we thought. And then came Putin's annexation of the Crimea, which left us also under shock, because we thought, how can somebody do that? And then came the attack on Ukraine, which changed the whole tectonic in the international relations. And from then on, you see the polarization, and it's not the global goals which we have together, which unites us, but it's the talk about what is separating us, and wars are looming on the horizon, and this is a complete different world. And I think in such an pessimistic or gray outlook, people tend to lean towards governments which are more black and white, which offer solutions which are simple, and language which is simple, and that's what you got. One can complain about it, but it's a fact at the moment, and that's another reason which makes it unfair for European observers to come to India and to criticize mostly, while in our own Europe we have right-wing tendencies, and many countries are leaning towards a very authoritarian government. So it's first bring your own house in order and then criticize others, I think, I would say. But it's a phenomenon, I think, which will be here for a while, and I'm an optimist and will hope that in a few years the pendulum will go a bit more back into the center, where we have more tolerance. But at the moment, I think we are in a moment where this will continue for a while.
But why do you think people at this point of time are leaning more towards maybe right of center or right leaning ideologies? Why are they so disgruntled with the liberals?
Well, because they are afraid of the future, and they are unsure about the future, and so that's why they expect clear answers, and they wanna have simple answers. But the second is important also, I guess. They think their welfare or their nations are threatened by migration. Now, if you talk about migration 10 years ago or 15 years ago, we were at 6 billion in the world. Now we are almost at 8 billion in the world, and it will be increasing. Of course, that they have a pressure of those people who live in countries where there is less welfare than in the richer countries, the tendencies of those people to come to the richer countries. I would do the same if I would live in one of these countries. So now it's the formulation of migration law have become a very political issue, because people would tend to say we have to close the borders, we don't let anyone in, and then as if a concentration on just their own nationals would solve any problems in a globalized world. This is nonsense. This can't be do. But the point is, you have to make intelligent immigration laws where you bring in people who help the economy to grow, and students. What we do in Germany, this kind of what we call Fachkräfte, where we have skilled workers and then students and this kind of thing, and people, but also, of course, leaving space for some asylum seekers, but with a much better control than we did before. And I think if we get the migration situation more in this solution tracks, then I think even the right wingers will see that without immigration, none of our nations would prosper.
Okay. Do you think Germany is also, as you mentioned, Germany is facing a similar challenge now? The German Vice Chancellor Olaf Scholz had to forcefully dissolve the parliament, announce elections in February. He does not have the numbers to stay on in power. The AfD is being supported by Elon Musk and a number of right-wing politicians across the globe, and particularly in the West. How is the political, outlook looking like in Germany currently?
Well, in Germany we are used to coalitions. I think in the history of our nation after Second World War, we had only twice no coalitions. Otherwise, we had always coalitions. Sometimes with two parties, sometimes with three parties, and this will continue. And coalition means a lot of work in the parliament on compromise building, and this is happening at the moment as well. Now we are, as the rest of the world also, but especially in Germany, where you have a huge industrialized country, we are in a very remarkable transition period. Transition. We gave up nuclear powers. We are now giving up the engine and cars, driven cars in our economy is mostly driven by the car industry, and we have put a goal on electric cars, and same with the renewable energy, and then we have the war with the Russian war against Ukraine, and which cuts off energy supply. So there are a lot of transition, and of course artificial intelligence and technology revolutions, which are a challenge to everyone. Now, I think we will get through this because we always found solutions, but this makes it a bit difficult to find the right coalition to do that. We will have the elections, and they will run well, the elections, and then we will have afterwards a period of coalition building, which is not easy, but we will manage to get a good government, I guess.
And what is the sentiment of the people on the ground, the average German on the ground? We saw Elon Musk holding that interview with the opposition party leader of the AfD. We have also seen in Romania, in Georgia, in Italy, they are all right-wing governments that have come in power. What's the sentiment of the people on the ground? Is there more support for the AfD today than it was previously?
Of course, if you talk to the AfD people, they will support it. They will say that was great what Elon Musk has done. The other 80% will say this is a terrible thing to do. I think we should tune down a bit the tone there. It's not the end of the world that he has done it, but we have to keep an open eye. You know, in a democracy, everyone can say what he wants, and even Musk can say what he wants. If it's just words, and if it's just doing an interview here and there, that's fine. People make up their minds. If it's the support with money to parties, and if it's a different kind of fake news influences, and then is where the buck stops. And I think this is what people would say. We have to not over dramatize it, but keep an open eye. If you would have supported, let's say, the Green Party or let's say left-wing party, then they would have been maybe happy, and the other side would not have been happy. I think generally no country likes it when big money from outside influences the elections.
Okay.
And I think that's a good spot, and we have. But on the other hand, I would not dramatize it. But as an elector, as a voter, I would say, let's keep an eye on it, and let's not, let him not overdo things.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much, Ambassador Lindner, for joining me on the telecast, sharing your views. Once again, congratulations for the release of this fantastic book. It's an interesting synopsis that you provide to us with a number of subjects that have been touched upon about India as this global economy that is rising in the international sphere. And looking forward to reading the book. And thank you very much once again for joining me on NewsX.
Thank you, Megha. Thank you, Megha, and all the best to you.
Well, on that note, I slip into a short break. Thanks for watching NewsX.